Hey, what is up guys? It is your boy Speed here, and today we're going to be looking at Shad's Razor and see how he absolutely dominates chicken fighters in the safe lane. This is definitely a bit of an off-traditional safe lane hero, but all in all, I think the hero has a lot of potential. It's been getting picked as a mid laner, an off laner, and I definitely think it's a good safe laner as well. And so this video will hopefully help you and help me become a better safe lane player, especially when it comes to these lane dominating heroes. You know, Razor is a hero that's, in my opinion, very similar to the likes of a Slark or an Ursa, where he doesn't necessarily have the best built-in farming mechanics, but the hero does have really good lane dominating mechanics and the ability to kind of just take over the first 10-15 minutes into the game and still scale based on new builds you can go and talents. So let's get into it. And I'd also like to let you guys know that I just made a full-length replay review of a Terrorblade game I played over on the GameLeap website. It's not going to come to YouTube, so if you're interested in content like that, really, you guys know I try to give you the best information, and I do really believe in GameLeap, especially the videos I've been making as of late are very high quality, in-depth, educational content that, you know, it's a lot of fun to watch, and it's going to help you get to the next level. It's going to help you gain rank. All right, let's get into the video. So getting into his items, he has 2 circlets, 2 branches, and 2 sets of tangos. Clearly, his idea here is that he just wants to build up as much attack speed as possible with HP and a couple sets of tangos, right? When it comes to Razor, all you're trying to do is essentially build forms of survivability and attack speed. You rarely build damage on this hero, naturally because you have an ability that gives you damage over time. The first thing I will say is that at level 1, you're not strong. Keep this in mind, guys. And I think, like, for a lot of people, they fall into this bad habit, this bad set of circumstances where they pick one of these lane dominators, right? They pick an Ursa, they pick a Slark, they pick a Razor, and they don't know when they're actually good. So Razor is primarily good at level 3. If we look at the numbers on his link, you'll notice that it goes from 7 drain rate to 12, goes up in duration, up in buff duration. Now, you might be saying, oh, that's not even a double in the buff of drain, but the thing is, the amount of damage you can get from it without having to overcommit is about 30 to 40, and that's all you need to completely make the enemy useless. And now as we watch him drag wave, I'll quickly talk about this, but I just want to say that that's the same thing with Ursa and Slark. These heroes tend to need an item plus their level 3 just to like come online. Now, they ended up pushing the lane into their tower. The Tiny had dragged the wave, and this is the correct response. So for anyone, if you ever run into the scenario where the position 4 drags your wave, you kind of just want to pull it around, right? You want to pull it in between your tier 1. Unfortunately, did end up losing the range creep, which is certainly not optimal, but yeah, you kind of do that. Then you have to pull creep aggro. Keep in mind, creep aggro is global. So if I show you and go to his player perspective, you'll notice that his camera will shift to any hero on the map. Let's see what he actually does. So he clicks on the Underlord. You see that quick shift? Really, really fast. This guy's a pro player, guys, you know? They can do these things really quickly. But he shifts over to the Underlord, right-clicks on him, right? Basically attacks him, and then goes back and cancels it. And this will deny up the range creep. And the reason why this is crucial is 2. There's 2 reasons. Number 1, the range creep dies the fastest, and number 2, the range creep does the most damage, and therefore if you want to keep the lane back and you want to deny all of your creeps, you need to kill the range creep first. Now obviously Era is going to contest because he's a good player, the Razor's going to go for the link, Shad's going to go for the link, and you can see as he gets tossed away due to his low level and static link and, you know, no item, he only steals 12 damage, which is not bad. It's still technically a 24 damage swing, but the key thing here is that he keeps the lane back, right? You're going to see he's going to focus on getting these denies as much as humanly possible, and this is super key. Obviously, Era knows what he's doing, so he's going to keep the lane back, and then he'll be able to take the next wave under tower. So this is a pretty good sequence, and essentially what you're seeing here is also for everyone who ever ends up playing in the opposite side, if you ever end up playing position 4 or off lane, this is also a great lesson. You have to adapt to your matchup. People don't look at their lanes before they go into the lane, and this kills them, right? It destroys their ability to play the lane. Shad knows that if the lane is even, he'll win the lane, but so does, right? So does Chessie and Era, and so they're gonna drag the wave, right? And they mix it up. But obviously at some point in the lane, this is not gonna be nearly as easy, as he'll pick up boots on the Razor, he'll have some Wraith bands, and eventually he'll be able to kind of take it to them. And eventually we hit the point of critical mass. What I mean by this is when you take over the lane. Obviously, he's not level 3, as I mentioned, he's level 4. That's because of how the lane was kind of set up. But when you get to this point, your positioning wants to change. You'll notice now that he's going to position in between the creep wave. A lot of players, they play it wrong. They essentially say, okay, I need to kill the person, but that's all that's going through their head. What you need to be thinking is, how do I zone the person off the wave? Kills are basically just another form of a way to, yeah, obviously get net worth, but most importantly, to zone them off the wave. Creep waves, if you look at the numbers, are extremely valuable. They're more valuable than kills, obviously, because you don't have to commit resources to kill a creep wave, well, most of the time. And so that's what he's doing. He's simply staticking the wave. He's more than happy for this to be the current state of the lane, right? They're keeping it back. He's staticking it, even maxing out his link. So clearly, he has a very, very obvious idea of how he wants to play this game. If you max the link, you're going to be running around, kicking people out of side lanes. And that's exactly what he's doing with his build. He's got 2 Wraith Bands, he's got a wand, he's got boots. His build is designed, it is structured to play the early game. And this is how you know someone's good at Dota, and you want to make sure you're doing this on whatever heroes you're playing, right? If you're playing PA and you have no intent on fighting, you probably shouldn't buy like a bunch of Wraith Bands and a wand, because that's not going to get you to the point where you want to be, which is probably Deso BKB. On Razor, he's going to be going treads all these stats, and you'll likely see him fighting, right? Even if you weren't to watch this game, you should assume after he builds up a couple of items and a couple levels, he'll be taking a lot of skirmishes. One thing I will say though is that, you know, everything in life needs a balance. And so at this point in the lane, the Underlord leaves, right guys? The Underlord's kind of just chilling, he's jungling. They even have this word they can see he's jungling. And you'll see Shad will actually turn on his ultimate right here, bit of a replay bug, but he turns it on right here and starts pushing out the lane. On top of that, he even made a stack. And so what he's doing is he's kind of making a balance, right? He's having a balance. He's saying, okay, if the Underlord wants to just hide, if the Underlord wants to just chill under his tower, well, I'm not going to get anything, right? I'm not going to be able to get as much as I'd want. And so instead what Shad does is he starts playing for efficiency, right? Considering how the Underlord is playing. Now, Underlord ends up stepping up. This is definitely a bit of a shocking mistake from Chessie. I don't really understand why he would cast Firestorm here. It seems highly unnecessary considering the wave is going to push in. But now there's no Underlord, so obviously he can kind of change up his gameplay and look to hit the tower again. Next up, we're going to see our first rotation of the game from Shad and talk about why this is a beautiful rotation, why this is the perfect rotation. So here, at about the 9-minute mark, he's very strong. Maxed link, 2 points in Q, ready to go. And he sees that Era, Zibe, and Supreme are all mid. They're going to be looking for a play on the mid lane. Now, why is this such a good gank? It's because he can set up, and they have a preemptive ward. This is why vision is everything in Dota. If you can set up a play, and you know they're going to overcommit, right? You know they're there, but they don't know that you know. These are the best plays. So he's going to TP deep in the trees. All right, they're going to set up this play. He clearly communicates to his Witch Doctor, hey, I'm going to TP in, wrap on them. So Witch Doctor now sets up, the Earth Spirit can set up, and SF can collapse. And so essentially you see this beautiful play where because of their vision advantage, they can set up a coordinated collapse. And in pubs, yeah, this is a little bit more difficult. But in pubs, what is a good example of this, right? What's kind of something that you don't have to synergize with your team? Well, an example of that is when they're diving your tower, because you see them coming, you know they're coming, so if they're sieging your tower and then dive, you can be prepared, you can be ready. And this is kind of a good example where you see a beautiful silence out from Aramis, you see a great cast on the backline, followed up by a fear from the SF, and oh my god, an absolute disaster for chicken fighters. So yeah, that was not what you like to see, but beautiful from Viking. Now going back here, I think I'd like to talk about like kind of what his next step is, because I think for a lot of people they'd be like, okay, well I have to keep fighting because I'm against the Luna. This Luna's level 10, right? She's got maxed out glaives, she's got a Mask of Madness, she's gonna outfarm me like crazy hard. And you'd be right, she is gonna outfarm me crazy hard. But you have to be careful about what you do when you have this thought, right? Because you'll also note that he doesn't just instantly run into the triangle, because they have a ward, right? Like right here, you see that how they have this ward? He could have just ran into the triangle. Now it ends up getting dewarded, and that's the problem. That's the problem. They kind of know that, okay, Viking GG, if given the opportunity, are going to invade. They're going to attack our triangle, smoke into our triangle. Why? Because we have a Luna. They have a high-paced team comp. We have a Luna. We need to protect her. And so in Shad, kind of just slows down the pace of the game. You can see he pops his ultimate, kind of just going to let things play out. And this might seem weird. It's like, oh, if you're playing Razor, why would you ever hit jungle camps? It kind of seems like a grief. Because the problem is, look at the map. Look at the map. If no one on Chicken Fighters is bottom, and no one's even showing mid, they're clearly just like 5 top essentially. And you can't run into 5 heroes. It doesn't work. Even if you're 3k net worth ahead, and I'm sure they knew they were ahead, even if you're ahead, you still can't do that. So instead, they wait for a dive. They wait for a vision advantage. I talk about this all the time. Vision advantage, vision advantage, vision advantage. Towers are the biggest source of that. He can obviously see them coming, get behind them, and set up for a big play. Right after that big play, he TPs bottom. I like this TP a lot. I like this TP for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's simply good for his farm, right? There'll be a way for him to farm. He could have TP'd mid to do that, but also what I think could have been a big idea for him here is that if Luna sees all of the action going on top, she might instantly go bottom, right? The Luna might go bottom. And so this is like, obviously I don't know exactly what Chad is thinking, but this is kind of me trying to get inside of his head and thinking what I would be thinking, which is like, okay, if someone sees that, even if it's not the Luna, it could be the Underlord to go shove it out. They might go there and Shad could catch him off guard. Now, obviously no one goes there, so he doesn't want to waste his time and wait. That would hamper his farm. If Razor ever just kind of AFKs for too long, he will fall drastically too far behind, so he ends up kind of just farming it, which is okay as well. And then once again, same thing as always. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. He's going to walk back mid, right? And because not only do they want to defend this tower, which they end up not really doing, but if his team was able to get in position, if they were able to set up, he could then take a good fight there, right? Because he could get behind them. And the only key you need to think about as Razor is if you can flank the enemy team, right? If you can get on them with a good link, a long duration link, and not get focused, you win the fight. The way he loses the fights these games is if he has to run into them. Look at their team comp. They're all magical damage. Razor hates that because he prefers like physical damage team comps where he can link one guy and then kind of ignore the rest because he's really fast. But these high control nuke team comps are really a big problem for Razor. They cause him a lot of trouble, at least in the fights, unless you can pick them off, unless you can come from a side angle. And yeah, it's really funny, but just really keep this in mind, guys. It doesn't, like, anytime you're playing one of these heroes like Razor, you have to think about the farm distribution of the map, or Slark. You have to say, okay, I know they have a Luna, I know this hero farms me, but because this hero farms me, it probably means that that hero is pretty weak in the early game. Think about it. Any hero that farms quickly tends to have a strong early game weakness, right? Think about the ability of Ursa to fight in the early game compared to a hero like Luna. On average, it's quite bad for the Luna, right? The Ursa is going to be able to do quite a bit more, especially if he goes a fighting build, which is not too common anymore, but you get the point, right? And so if we look at the map, right, about a minute back, we'll see the farm distribution. As his team is fighting top and everything is going on top, no one's farming bottom on Chicken Fighters. No one can farm mid because the wave's not being shoved in, which actually is a big concept for me that I think I'll develop on in the future and even pros have to improve on, which is like, if you don't shove in a lane, they can't farm it, right? I think there's actually some legitimacy to that. We even saw OpenAI when that was like a popular thing. They just would have support like static a lane. It was really funny, but actually I think it was super legit. And so yeah, even if he's farming bottom, even if it's not fast, he's kind of just closing down that part of the map. No one can 1v1 him on the enemy team. No one can 1v1 him. That's what Razor does. He 1v1s, right? They don't have like a Pugna at least, right? Some hero like that can mess with him. They don't have that. And so yeah, he can ignore it. On top of that, he rushes BKB this game. We talked about how the enemy team is basically all magical damage. Luna is not a physical damage threat until later into the game, and so I like his build. It's a BKB rush, but frankly, no item is really going to amp your farming speed too much on Razor, and so yeah, he just doesn't bother. Next up, I'd like to talk a bit of theory with you guys. I even think like pro teams maybe could find this useful to some extent. I often see this play a lot where pro teams kind of like feed around the pit. Now, let's break this down so you guys can kind of get the gist of like generally why pro teams rosh here. So Viking GG knows they're stronger, for sure. They're stronger. If it's like a clean 5v5, on average, obviously spellcasting can come down to, you know, a lot of spells could be missed or hit. SF could blow someone up or not. Kezu could hit a 4-man stomp or not. You know, there's a lot of factors in a fight. But on average, with the current type of heroes that they have, the timings that they have, the big heroes, the BKBs, they'll probably win the fight if everything's even. Now, Viking GG is taking Rosh. The reason why they're taking Rosh here is to force the enemy team to respond. It's not really about the Rosh, which seems kind of crazy, right? It's like, why would you hit Rosh if you're not trying to kill Rosh? Well, I mean, they'll kill it if they don't respond. That's great. They'll get a free Aegis. That's wonderful. But really the key here is they want to fight. And so that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bait the enemy team in by hitting Roshan. They know that if they hit Rosh, the enemy team will come and they'll have to walk into their vision, right? Viking GG can set up wards, and that's a big advantage of Roshan. So where's the ward? Here it is. Right, you see this ward? This is their Roshan ward. And so this is always how these pro teams execute Roshan. They feel like they hit a peak where they want to fight, or they just think they can kill Rosh. Sometimes it is about Rosh, depending on your team comp. They do that, and then they set up a ward, and if the enemy team comes, they fight them, if they think they're stronger. I hope that makes sense, guys. And now, a lot of pro teams, the only thing they do is they make a bit of a mistake where they overcommit too hard. So you see Kezu drops half HP to Rosh. They don't kill Rosh very well, right? The SF is not BKB. This is a bug, but it kind of shows you what's going to happen. Eventually he will have to BKB, so they get stomped. The enemy team knows they're roshing, They don't panic, right? I think Chicken Fighter plays this well. They don't panic. Why? Because they know they don't really kill Roche that fast. Razor doesn't do much of anything to Roshan. It's pathetic how much damage Razor does to Roshan. SF is meh at best. And eventually what ends up happening is they have an Underlord. So Viking GG gets caught in the pit, right? They get caught in a Firestorm. And a Pet of Malice. SF's half HP gets bashed by Roche. And all of a sudden, it's a freaking disaster. It's a disaster because SF has to pop BKB to not die to Roshan and a Firestorm. So, yeah, basically what I'm saying here is what I think Viking GG should have done is they should have hit this Roche, get it to about half HP, make Chicken Fighters panic a little bit, and then instantly pop a smoke. I think they should back to Heroes 5, pop a smoke, and then get to this high ground, right? I even think maybe this ward should be on the high ground. Maybe that's so it doesn't get dewarded as easily, but you get down a ward on this high ground, you can see here, and then you could jump, right? You could jump here. And I think that would be good for them. Instead, they kind of get caught in this awful situation where they kind of play into Underlord's hand, and yeah, it's not fun when you have to run through a Pit of Malice. It's really not fun. And you can imagine how this fight goes. Boom is 2 HP. Obviously, he can't participate in the fight. The Lina just tries to right-click him down. Lina ends up overextending maybe slightly. Viking does a good job here of sort of baiting the Lina in. They kite out. And then, you know, Shad obviously is going to commit forward. But the problem with this is, even though they end up jumping this Lina, which is great, obviously this allows now Chessie to set up a really good pit. They get a good stomp onto Chad, right? A good ET ulti, and Charlie just sort of auto attacks him to death here as the Luna, and the glaives start bouncing. So yeah, SF couldn't do anything. Frankly, it ends up being like, you see how even though like the SF literally couldn't do anything and Kesu was even half HP, that it was almost a good fight? Well, yeah, that's the point. They wanted to take the fight, but I think they should have smoked and wrapped. Now, skipping ahead here to about the 31 minute mark, I like the contrast. You know, I'm going to end the video here. I think this is a great way to end it. We're going to see sort of the contrast between the last Roche fight and this Roche fight and what they do. Now, to be fair, this Roche fight's a lot better. They had just killed the Lina off a smoke gank. Okay, great. So there's that, right? They just killed Lina off a smoke gank. Fantastic. And the Tiny has to buy back. Now, obviously, the Earth Spirit's still dead, so it's still a 4v4. But I like what they do here, right? They kind of just like camp this high ground ward. So obviously they're showing that they have a high ground ward, but they're kind of just baiting it, right? They're baiting it. They're very careful about overcommitting to Roche for the same reasons we talked about last time. So obviously this time, Chessie tries to do the same thing. Of course, he's an Underlord. You know, that's his job. Walk in the front, cast his spells. And instead of overcommitting to the pit, now they chain stun Chessie, and they can sort of try to burst him down. Now they don't, he's an Underlord, but eventually they do. Right? They don't burst them, but they chip them down. And that allows them the space to push Chicken Fighters back and then finish Roche. And that's kind of what I felt like they should have done last time. You could argue that it's a little bit easier. I don't think Centaur had Blink the last one. It's besides the point, right? It doesn't really matter. They could still have kind of done the same thing with an Earth Spear roll. And yeah, now they get a clean Roche, right? They get this Roshan and they can kind of try to do the same thing, right? Jump on the ward and rinse repeat that. And yeah, that's going to be about the end of the game. Now they got a couple pickoffs. Onto the high ground they go. They got a cheese. They got a link for this Luna. You know, bit of a deep initiation, but hey, if they get a decent link off on this Luna, it's basically GG. Even 68 damage, it's kind of funny, but it's actually a ton, right? It's like, what, 25% of her overall damage? It's a really high number, so yeah, it's a good end to the fight. Eventually, they try to chip them back, right? Charlie is pretty strong, but it's simply not enough. And yeah, that's going to be all for today's video. I know this was a lot more like in-depth. It wasn't very hero-specific or anything like that, but that's kind of the point. I like making these videos from time to time, which is a bit more theory, a lot less hero-specific in mechanics. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, and I'm out. Peace. And that's all, but remember, before you leave, come on, before you tune out, subscribe to the GameLeap website, where we are going to help you get to the next rank. If you're stuck, click the link down below, and I'm out. Peace.